We'll just do this really fast because we've got a lot of things we want to get through here. And if you'll just look here, we're in the church age. The next thing that's going to take place is going to rupture this earth like they've never seen before. It's never happened before. If you go to 1 Peter chapter 3, you'll find out that God says, coming in the last days, there will be scoffers and them saying, where is the promise of His coming? You guys talk about Jesus Christ coming. Where is everything continues as it was before? There's no change. But they'll find there'll be a change when hundreds of thousands of people actually disappear in a moment and a twinkling of an eye. If you're a Christian, you'll go up. The dead in Christ shall rise first. Us which are alive and remain shall be caught up together to meet the Lord in the clouds. Then comes Russia being destroyed right after the rapture. How do we know that? Because it takes 7 years to bury all of the dead. Hundreds and thousands and so forth there. And after that, then we're going to find out, so we're going to study some things here this morning on this. It becomes very interesting. And but anyway, then the Antichrist convinces everybody, makes a covenant with Israel. 3.5 years, and he breaks that covenant. They're allowed to go into the rebuilt temple. They say, and in fact, a great Bible scholar who was over there said they have it pre-cut, ready to go up. It's not going to be like Solomon's temple, but it'll take about 3 months or 3.5 months in order to get this erected to where they've ordained now, since they've been back into the land, Cohens every year down at Tel Aviv. And they're getting them ready, training them out of the Old Testament there to offer the sacrifices just like they did clear back here in the Old Testament times. Just like they did. Then we find out after 3.5 years he breaks his covenant here. Then everything from here on, you got to take 666, either in your hand or on your forehead, or you will be decapitated. If you read Revelation chapter 20 and verse 4, they lost their heads, and there'll be none of this playing around like we do in courts today. They'll put that decapitation with the guillotine on there so the whole world can see it in order to scare you into taking the mark of the beast. This isn't going to be something hidden because we don't want to scare people. They want to scare you to death. Take that mark of the beast and seal your destiny to hell for all time and eternity. That's what the Antichrist wants to do. He goes in at this time here. He goes into the temple of the Jewish temple, and he declares himself to be God. All of those people that disappeared, I had to get rid of them because they were anti-peace. We couldn't deal with them. All they did was talk about religion and this and one thing or another. I'm the Christ. And if you go to 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 and verse 4, he says, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God. He'll be able to do miracles. God will permit that. He can call fire down from heaven. He can make a beast speak, therefore. And you'll have a one world religion and a one world church. Now this becomes very interesting. And then Christ comes back. You have the Battle of Armageddon. I get that. And that takes place here. God says, I got to shorten those days, and we'll get into that in Bible prophecy. How many days is shortened and so forth. Except there will be no flesh saved. The Antichrist will be the most mass murderers you've ever seen. Now you'll see some of that in the film here that's coming up that you're going to watch. And then we find out here, we have the Battle of Armageddon. We don't have that in there. Christ comes back, and all of these armies, these millions of people that are lost here, go up into the Valley of Esdraelon and Megiddo and so forth. It's called the Battle of Armageddon, where God absolutely destroys the whole thing so fast that it will literally be where the blood flows as deep as the horse's bridles. It will flow. This future is already predicted, just like the future when Christ came was. And then Christ will rule for 1,000 years. He'll destroy the nations here. He'll judge the nations. Those that are left will be cast, if they're lost, will be cast into the lake of fire. And in Matthew 25:41, he says, depart from me, you're cursed, into the everlasting fire, prepared for the devil and his angels. Here's the mark of the beast. You sold your soul out to the Antichrist. Let me see that mark. Yeah, you got it in your hand, you got it in your forehead. Depart, you're in. They do not go to Hades at this time. They go directly into the lake of fire for all time and eternity. It's interesting. Then he says to those here, just prior to the 1,000-year reign of Christ, come inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the earth. And isn't that wonderful? You're saved, you've trusted Jesus Christ, and you're absent from the body, present with the Lord, not present in torment down there, you see. So that's just a little bit of an outline. Now, I want to point out something here, and then we'll go through this here. I think that would be interesting to point it out now before we start, okay? We put this and made up this new map here. When Russia's destroyed, and before we get into the scriptures here, at least it'll let you notice the map. 5 allies. Here we have Germany. Here we have Germany that's going to come down. Now when she comes down, she's not going to come down through all of these countries on horseback. That's too much. She comes down here to the top half here to the northeast corner here of Italy, hit the sea, come right straight on down here, and come right on over here to attack Israel. Here's Turkey right here. All she has to do is come right down through Syria here and attack Israel. Here's Russia. Comes right on down here with here, comes right on through here to attack Israel. And here's Iran. Iran there is prophesied as one of Russia's allies, going to come right there to attack. And here's Ethiopia, clear down here, and she comes up, and she'll probably hit the Red Sea and come right straight on up here and right here to attack Israel too. If you can see all of these countries from all over, you got north, south, east, and west. Israel is surrounded. And if it would not be for God intervening, she wouldn't have a chance. But we're going to find out it is God who does the destroying, all right? If you have your Bibles, you want to turn over to Ezekiel, unless you have our charts that we have given out here. If you have that, it would be good to look at that. So we'd like to start out first here, and let's go here to Ezekiel here, and let's go here to chapter 38, and look here in verse 10, all right? And thou, Russia, get there. Okay, I'll get that off there. Okay, Ezekiel chapter 38, verse 10 says, And thou, Russia, shalt think an evil thought. Look in verse 11 here, if you will, and 12. And thou shalt say, I will go up to the land of unwalled villages, and I will go to them that are at rest, and dwell safely, all of them dwelling without walls and having neither bars nor gates. Now, if you'll notice, clear back, when this prophecy was given at the time of Ezekiel in about 600 BC, you'll find that Israel and so forth there, at towns and villages, were surrounded by walls. These were their defensive walls. They don't have them anymore. They're not there anymore. And even if you go over there today, you'll go down around the southern part there, the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, you'll see some fences up there. That is for the bordery lines there. That isn't for defensive purposes at all. Now, when it comes here and it says, and it's very interesting, unwalled villages, I will go to them that are at rest. What rest do they have? The covenant that the Antichrist, or I should say, the Federation of Nations, which the Antichrist will be involved in, but he hasn't revealed himself yet, as far as being the Antichrist, the God, where he goes into the temple and says, I am God, declares himself to be God, and so forth. He doesn't do that till after 3.5 years, but at the first start there, after the rapture, there is a mess in this world. Every Christian, there's Christians in Germany, there's Christians in all of these countries. There's Christians in Russia. Although Russia is atheistic. It's not worshiping many gods. They have 0 gods. They're true 100% atheistic, and so forth. So, he comes on down, he makes a covenant with the nation of Israel. So, what's the first thing we do? Here, I'm in charge. We're a Federation of Nations. We're a peaceful. And he comes, the Bible tells us in Daniel, he comes as a peacemaker. He will be, and I will tell you this, when I see Obama, and we're not preaching politics, I'm just saying for the man and the power that he has, and the influence that he has, and the authority with which he speaks. But what he speaks is not what he really has in mind, only to accomplish what he wants to do to bring to the forefront of what's really behind it, and that is one world government. He would personify the Antichrist. The Antichrist probably will be a little better. I don't know how he could be any better. You know, this man can sell a snowball to an Eskimo. But here's the point. Israel will buy it. They will turn in their arms. He says, we'll have peace. Don't worry about a thing, Israel. We'll protect you. Go in your temple. Worship. Offer your sacrifices. And do that. You have a right to worship however you did in the Old Testament times. We're for you. We'll protect you. Don't worry about a thing. Turn in all of your arms. The arms that America has given to Israel. Some of the most sophisticated weaponry that we have, Israel has to protect herself now. But when the rapture takes place, every Christian will be taken out. And there will not be that for there. And they will just sacrifice that because, hey, the Messiah, you know, we're here. The one world government is here. We're allowed to worship like we want to worship. And they will do that there. The weaponry, they will have none. No walls will they have any. And that's exactly how one country takes over another country, is to get you to forfeit your armament so that you can't fight back. And that's what it is. They'll do that to Israel. Now, it comes on down to the last part in verse 12, to take a spoil and to take a prey and to turn thine hand upon the desolate places that are now inhabited and upon the people that are gathered out of the nations which have gotten cattle and goods and dwell in the midst of the land. Well, there's a couple of things there. They've got the cattle and things. Everything's going great with Israel. They're worshiping in their temple. They got all of the sheep and the cattle and everything else to make sacrifices with. They got plenty to eat. Everything's going great. They're running their own land. And they think this is a utopia. Israel will. You'll see. But the thought, he says, to you, Russia, you come down to take a spoil and to take a prey and to turn thy hand upon the desolate places that are now inhabited, because you'll find out that God is blessing places now that they can have, and they can grow their crops and things like that, and to do that. But God says, this is what Russia really thinks. Let's go on down. Then we find out that America has supplied all of these things here, and they will, in turn, just forfeit them because they believe. They believe what the Antichrist has promised them. The word safety here comes from a Hebrew word, betach, and is frequently used to signify confidence and boldness and being without any care. This is what Russia sees after the rapture, and it views the nation of Israel as it views it. God has foretold it 2,600 years before it ever come to pass. Now, let's go on. The Antichrist will attempt to convince all nations that world peace can only be obtained when all weapons of warfare are destroyed. America will be part of that. What do you say? It's not in any prophecy anywhere other than, according to Zechariah, when all of these nations go against God, unless it's one of all of these nations that go against God, and I believe without any question it will be, because they're already doing it today. You look at America today, it's not a God-fearing country. Not at all. It's not I should say, a God-fearing country. We've taken God out of everything. We don't want God around. You Christian people, you're the troublemakers. You're always wanting to argue. You're always wanting to fuss and fight. You always want to have some agenda there. Now, we do have preachers that are in accordance with what God really wants. And He wants a one-world peaceful. When He created this world, He wants a one-world peace on this world. Isn't that right? That's the reverse psychology. You know, but you have to go against the Bible to know that, because man's heart is wicked continually, you see. Now let's go on down. There's a lot of things we want to get to here. God will be the destroyer of Russia, not the Antichrist. So here you have in one part of the world here, you got the United Federations here, concerning the fact of making this covenant here with the nation of Israel. Then you have Russia and her allies here that says, no, we're not going along with that bunch of bull. No way. You see. Now, he tells with allowing Israel to go ahead and worship your God and going into your temple. Russia says, we're not going along with this peaceful bunch of stuff. Our agenda is to control the world. And we got 5 of these allies here. We're going to, I don't care what covenant you made here with the United Federation of Nations here, and you've offered Israel peace. That's a bunch of baloney. We don't go along with that. We're going down and destroy her now. That's why God says, that's what you think, buddy, because I will destroy you. You see, many times people think that God doesn't control the weather. He controls all of the weather. All of it. you see. When you had the hurricane down in New Orleans, you know how filthy, dirty town that is? That's a dirty, filthy town. Really, you got more prostitution, crooks, and everything else down there, and things going here, anti-God in there. Sometimes the innocent are destroyed with the guilty. Sometimes they are. In a mass destruction, they surely are there. But God says, precious is in the eyes of God are His saints. So sometimes that happens. But let's go on down and see what God says. So if you look here, in Ezekiel chapter 38, verse 22, He makes it perfectly clear that He will render the judgment. You see, God is so specific. He marks down exactly what's going to happen and who's going to do it. And He says here, I will plead against him, that's Russia and her allies, with pestilence. I'd underline that. With blood, and I will rain upon him and upon his bands. Rain is a different word from the next rain. Upon his bands, upon many people that are with him, in overflowing rain, and great hailstones, fire, and brimstone. Man! Well, you say, can you get a sight of that? Well, we're going to look at that a little bit, okay? We find out the word plead is a lot different in the English language. When you say plead there, it's like, well, will you please go to this movie with me? Or will you please do that? Would you like to go on vacation with us? I just pray that you can. And you plead with them and plead with them. That's not what the Hebrew means. So when that was translated plead, it's very interesting. We think of it in the English here as God pleading, begging, or trying to convince Russia not to invade Israel, but that's not the meaning of the Hebrew word at all. The meaning of that word, plead, is shaphat, S-H-A-P-H-A-T, and it means the past sentence and to punish. In other words, the sentence is already passed, the punishment is now going to be rendered. How is it going to be rendered? By pestilence, by blood, by rain, a general rain. Then it becomes a overflowing rain. I mean, the rivers and everything is going to be, and remember, they're on horseback. They're on horseback. And great hailstones. Then fire and brimstone. Good night. You'd think any one of these would be enough against Russia, wouldn't you? But God hates a nation that hates Him. To give you an idea of this, when it says pestilence, the Hebrew is deber, D-E-B-E-R, and it means some kind of physical plague of sickness, some kind. It's has been used, it could be physical disease, many times for those who rebel against Him. He warned Israel before they went into the promised land. He warned them and He said, if you go after these heathen gods, I'm going to promise you that I'm going to bring pestilence upon you and you cannot be healed. Almost like AIDS. Is there a cure for it? No cure. They've got medicine to where it can prolong it from progressing, but the actual cure, no. And you've got to have a lot of money to have that. Dr. Lorraine Day, in her book on AIDS, if you can ever get that book, try on your computers to get on a Christian or on a used bookstore and see if you can get that book by Dr. Lorraine Day concerning AIDS. And it is fascinating. You will find out how that you'll find out many things about AIDS. In fact, she quit practicing medicine because the rubber gloves that they give you when they do an operation cannot keep the AIDS virus out. It's that small to go right through a rubber glove, and condoms, it'll go right through that, and so forth like that. So there's no protection. That's amazing, isn't it? And how out in California, when they begin to do it, they would go in and give blood, these that were infected with AIDS, so that other people, that's before they begin to test, and they found out so many people were getting AIDS, these homos and these pedophiles and these ones that were passing the AIDS and really passing it was your homosexuals and your lesbians. And they would go into the blood banks and give blood just in order to infect. They thought, well, we got it, we'll show you. And they passed it on to hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people. All that's documented. Be very good to get that if you want to really read something on it. She is a master at writing that book on it. So, when God said to Israel, if you get those heathen gods, I'm going to bring pestilences upon you. Need to do it. In Deuteronomy chapter 28 in verse 35 says this concerning that. The Lord shall smite thee, that's Israel, in the knees and in the legs with a sore botch that cannot be healed, from the sole of your foot to the top of your head. If you notice in verse 27, he says, here, the Lord shall smite thee with the botch of Egypt, and with the emeralds, and with the scab, and with the itch, wherefore thou canst not be healed. Isn't that something? You can't heal it. There's no amount of medicine for anything for it. Is he doing that same thing against Russia? Yeah, he will do. Same thing. Can God do it? He can bring on disease that you can't heal, and so forth. He can do that, especially when he's led it in the past to his enemies, and so forth. He said to Russia, I'll do the same thing to you. And you'll see why as we progress on here. I will rain. Hebrew is matar, M-A-T-A-R. It's a general rain. Overflowing rain, as the Hebrew for rain, is jeshem, J-E-S-H-E-M, and it's from a root meaning to rain violently, gush down, wash away, and thus described as an overflowing rain. You've seen some of the southern cities in Mississippi and so forth like that. Some of these others that have rains that's just washed houses away, and so forth. Those rains that come from the mountains and down there and so forth like that, couldn't stop them. And in fact, they had a show on it here a couple of nights ago that I was watching. And it was devastating, absolutely devastating on there. The rain, can God do it? He controls the rain. There's a reason why he does things that you and I don't know. We don't know what's behind the scenes of some people and so forth like that, but God does. So he doesn't do things to hurt people and just to do that because he's just a mean God. That isn't the reason he does things. He does things a lot of time to get people's attention and so forth. A great hailstone. These hailstones are the size of a talent in the Greek, and which is about 120 pounds each. The Hebrew for great hailstones is equivalent to those described in Revelation 16:21. I'd like to read that to you. And there fell upon men a great hailstone out of heaven. This is in the tribulation period now. In here, when God pours out his wrath upon this earth here after the rapture. Okay? But he's going to do this now to Russia. Get rid of them first. And talent, and men blasphemed God because of the plague of the hail, and the plague thereof was exceedingly great. When you look that up there in Revelation 16:21, each hailstone was the size of approximately 120 pounds. Did you ever see anything like that? I've seen one come down the size of a golf ball once, and but I've never seen one. I guess they've come down like the size of baseballs too. I've never seen one like that. A golf ball as big as I've seen. And but I'll tell you what, boy, that makes you run for cover, you know. But here's 120 pounds, one hailstone like that. You've never seen anything like it in your life, you see. But we find out here that God says that there fell upon men a great hail out of heaven. Now, God used hailstones in the past. So this isn't anything new with the Lord. I mean, he's done this before, if you know your Bible and that. If you go to Joshua chapter 10 and verse 11 and so forth there, you'll find out when Gideon was being attacked by 6 other nations of the Amorites. Then Gideon called to Joshua and he said, hey, get over here and help us, man. We got these 6 Amorite nations that want to destroy us. And man, we need help. So if you go to verse 6, it tells they destroyed, or where they called Joshua in verse 8, Joshua says, and he talked to the Lord said, don't fear a thing, Joshua, you take your men over there, and I'm going to give them unto you. I'll fight your battle for you. Then you come on down there, you come down here to verse 11, where God says, there were more killed with the hailstones than there were with the armies of Joshua. In other words, more were killed with hailstones. God said, I'll take care of that. I'll send a bunch of hailstones. I'll knock them on the head. And he did. You know, if you were to put it in language there, you might write that down and look at it. Then we find out, if you want to go to Numbers chapter 16, verse 2 and 3, you'll find out that he consumed 250 princes of Israel and consumed other complainers and so forth. Let's go on down to fire and brimstone. That's another thing he's going to use on Russia. And if you go to Genesis chapter 19, verse 24 and 25, you'll find out that these homos have saturated the city of Sodom, Gomorrah, and so forth. There was actually 5 cities in the plain areas there. And you'll find out here that brimstone was used to destroy them. He said, get out of there, Lot. Get your family and get out of there. Abraham said to him, well, you won't destroy the city if there's 50. We couldn't find 50. In the old city of Sodom, how about 40? Can't find 40. How about 30? Can't find 30. How about 20? Can't find 20. Can you find 10 righteous people? And I won't destroy Sodom. Couldn't even find 10. Lot, take your daughters and so forth, get out of there before I destroy it. And he did, and he destroyed it with brimstone, fire and brimstone. That's the Hebrew word, G-O-P-H-R-I-Y-T, and it's describing it as a resin, as from a cypress, and sulfur as equally flammable. This is the wrath of God by the means he uses to destroy Russia also, besides the pestilences, beside the hailstones. You think God's not in control of this world? You got another thing coming, because he is. Now, we go on down. With this judgment is rendered of God. When it's rendered to God, it ignites men of these armies to actually kill each other. I'd like for you to read in verse 21 of the 38th chapter of the book of Ezekiel. And I will call for a sword against him throughout all of my mountains, saith the Lord God. Every man's sword shall be against his brother. Of all of these armies down here now when they're coming through. And every man's sword going to be against his brother, his relative, his brother as far as in the army and so forth like that. They're going to kill each other. Let me just paint the picture. You stop for a moment and you analyze the situation. You picture hundreds and thousands of soldiers with their warfare. Their warfare is made out of wood. That's important to remember. God says that. Here they come down through there. They run into a rain. They're coming down through all these mountains. Now, we don't have the other map up here this time, but let me point this out here. Here in Israel, all around Israel, from the Mediterranean Sea on into Jerusalem, nothing but mountains. There's mountains all around here. Clear on up, it runs clear on up here, clear down to the Dead Sea down here. Mountains, awful mountains, and valleys in between, and then you have to go up another mountain and so forth like that. And here they are on their horses. And it begins to rain. Well, no problem, we'll just put up for a day or so. But then, here comes a downpour like you have never seen. You know, horses can do nothing, they can go nowhere. None. And then here comes, along with all of this rain, here comes hailstones the size of 120 pounds apiece. Can you believe that? 120 pounds apiece. That would probably be the size of 2 chairs hooked together, and just put a circle around it would be a hailstone, something of that size, or something to be 120 pounds. Maybe a chair and a half. I don't know what to do, but just picture that. They're coming down killing men in this army all over the place. And then they're coming down with disease. Man, what's making me sick? I don't have any idea. I don't feel good anymore. Here, we're supposed to be coming down with Russia, taking over Israel, and we're going to control the world. But now I'm sick. I don't know what's wrong. I'm getting scabs on me. Where in the world did those come from? How about sores? How about sores? I got sores on me. What in the world caused that sore? I don't know what caused it, but it won't go away. I've had it for 2 or 3 days, and it's getting bigger and bigger, and so forth. And pretty soon, they've got no place to pitch a tent. They got nothing like that. They're counting on the weather, and I'm sure that they checked the weather, and it looked fine. Everything, we'll get down there in a few days. Weather looks good. We have no rain in sight. We have, let alone hailstorms, you know, let alone a hailstorm the size of 120 pounds. And here they are, and they are completely decimated. What in the world? We've been deceived. I can't figure this out. There's something wrong somewhere. And they begin killing each other. Just like Donner's Pass, if you're familiar with that. Some of the dead there when they went out toward Utah. And there was nothing. There was nowhere to go. There was no shelter. There was no nothing. Nothing. And you're getting sick and you're getting sores all over you. You got hailstones coming down. You can't go anywhere with the horses because it's too slippery. This is not just a little raindrops and it's going to stop. This is a downpour. Can you get a picture of what it would be like if you were on one of them horses and you were following Russia? And the end, there's no way out. We're going to die. And they just went berserk, began killing each other, what few are left on there. You'd have to see the situation. I hardly can even portray it, but at least it will give you a little bit of an idea how God took care of these atheist, God-hating people that come down against His chosen people. And God wrote this 650 or so years before Christ was ever born. And you're hearing about it right now. It's been in the Bible. You think God doesn't know the end from the beginning? Absolutely He does. Now, let's go on again, if we will, here. That'll just give us an idea. It sure proves Hebrews chapter 10 and verse 31. I'm sure it does. It is a fearful thing to fall into the hands of a living God, isn't it?